Welcome to NeverTheLess podcast with Bidemi Mark-Mordi, a show dedicated to organic leaders and leaderpreneurs. Today, you would learn how to discover your essence and live more powerfully.
Hello and welcome. It's another episode of the NeverTheLess show, a show for organic leaders and leaderpreneurs. My name is Bidemi Mark-Mordi, and last episode in this series, we're looking at the subject matter of heroism. Our focus really is on the thought that everybody is a possible hero, and that what makes someone a hero is the value that the recipient of their acts of heroism accords to their actions. So today we want to look at the different kinds of heroes that exist. I'm a student of literature, and what that means is that I tend to write. Now, I'm not much of a fiction writer, but when you write fiction, you are expected to have heroes for your story. And within that space, there are archetypes of heroes, different kinds of people that can become heroes depending on the flow of the story. Today, I want to highlight three kinds of heroes, and then we'll look at them so that we can really dive into what I think or what it is that I'm espousing by this series on what true heroism should be. Three kinds of heroes, I said. The first one is the active hero. The active hero takes charge of their fate. They're excited to be heroes. They want to be seen doing the things that they need to be seen. They are all over the place, and when people get in trouble or stuff like that, they call on them. The active hero is the neighborhood child who beats on everybody on behalf of another person. The active hero is the archangel type, the one at work who stands up for the ones that they feel like is the underdog. The active hero is the labor organizations that feel like they have to stand, and fight for the cause of the workforce. There are active heroes all around us. The question though is, who made them heroes? Why did they become this active? And why is it that is all they know to do with their lives? Active heroes are people who take it upon themselves to make a difference, whether for good or bad, because they believe that they can be. What makes an active hero different from you and me? From what I have seen in the 5 decades plus that I have lived, there's nothing that makes an active hero different from the passive one. And here's my point. Active heroes are people who thrust themselves out in the public eye and insist that they can make a difference. And sometimes they do. Other times we've seen them start well, and ultimately they become like the rest of us, toxic, corrupted, and all of that. And at the end of the day, you wonder, where was the point of heroism? But these people, no matter what they do, ultimately, you find that around them and those who have become their sycophants, they do not see something wrong in the change in the way that these people live their lives. The point is that active heroes enjoy the attention most of the time. They take charge, but they enjoy the attention. That's why you find the union leaders, everything for them is a press conference. Someone has to know that they are working. They are the heroes of the workforce. We get it. But everything is in negotiation. And from what we now know all across the world, 80% of the time, the negotiation is for their benefits. So they speak up where others want to endure. They speak up where others think that there are processes to follow. And they insist that they are the voice of everybody else. But does that make them true heroes? A few weeks ago, one of my younger sisters, that's how I refer to her, found herself in a situation where she was requiring heroes badly. She was driving to go and buy food somewhere, and she was accosted by 2 men who at gunpoint took her car from her. And they took her with the car and drove off. They drove off a long distance, and then ultimately they shoved her out of the car, took her phones, took her wallet, and there she was with nothing, and she needed to find her way home. In that dire and desperate situation, that young lady was requiring heroes. Of course, there were people who had big cars, who probably were law enforcement agents who just drove past because they didn't know, or perhaps, yes, they didn't know what was wrong with her. I'm also sure that she might have tried to find someone who would help her, and not everyone responded to her positively. According to how she told the story, she had gone a distance and then she came under a bridge where she found what we typically would call society miscreants, what we call in our own society area boys. Young men who probably don't have a source of livelihood, or so we think. Young men who we should be afraid of because they are a menace to society. Young men who, when we see them at certain times of the day, we should be afraid for our lives. But these were the only kind of people that she saw, and she walked up to them. And she said to them, "Oh, this is what has happened to me, and I need to get back home." You would not believe it, but I believe that you can believe it. These young men did not only give her money for transport, they flagged down a bus for her, and they told her how to get home. They told her, when you get to XYZ bus stop, you would alight from this bus, and then you would board another bus, and that bus should take you home. She may never see them again, but maybe she'll see them. What exactly do you think anyone could say about those young men, considering that it was getting dark when all of these things happened? Do you ever think that in the mind of that young lady that these people would always carry the badge of miscreants? I doubt it, because in that moment, they stepped up to the plate. They were thrust into a situation and they decided to do the right thing. Now, the truth of the matter is that these young men may not do the right thing every day, but in that one regard, they stepped up to the plate. They did what they were supposed to do, and that's what made them heroes. Maybe not heroes to me because I wasn't in that situation, but definitely heroes to the one whose life was threatened in that moment, and they came to her rescue. The point I'm making is that active heroes don't necessarily have to be people, or heroes don't necessarily have to be people who take pride in standing in the front of a camera and telling us what it is that they can achieve for us. Some heroes, just in the course of their day, are thrust into something and they have to do it. So when we look at active heroes, they follow through because they are personally invested 80% of the time. But then there is another group of heroes. These ones are known as passive heroes. These are people who are pawns of faith. They get dragged into adventure because someone made them do it. Left to them, they don't want to be found anywhere that adventure is mentioned, but somehow they are in a relationship or within a family of people who like drama, and so they find themselves pulled into this. They are passive because for them heroism is a demand that they don't want to step up to. They would rather just live their lives self-effacing, just doing their thing, never been mentioned, and they are fine with it. But once in a while, people like this get pulled into stuff and they have to stand and do what they ordinarily would not have been able to do if life were normal. Let's take the case of a woman whose child was stuck under a car, and out of nowhere, she musters the strength and she lifts that car so that her child could be dragged out from under the tire of a car. I can promise you that this particular woman, if the next day you put the same car down and you ask her to lift it, because the circumstances are different, they will not be able to lift. She would not be able to lift it. What put that strength upon her was seeing that her child's life was at risk. And in that, she got up and she did what she had to do. This woman will never go and print cards and do a documentary on how she's a hero, because she knows that that trait cannot be replicated without cause. Those are passive heroes. They do what they do. These are heroes on demand. They do well, but will never step up to the plate unless they are coerced or they are forced to. Does this make this woman's action less heroic because she would never be able to replicate it in her life again? I do not think so. I think that to that child, her mother came through for her, or his mother came through for him, and all the days of his life, he would always see the hero in that parent. The point I'm making is that there are different reasons why people step up to heroic acts. And they don't necessarily have to be because we want to be. And then, of course, the one that I want to talk about most during this series, the reluctant heroes. The reluctant hero doesn't seek adventure, but he's committed to doing good. He knows that left to him, life will be easy. He would not harm someone, and he doesn't expect someone else to harm them. Life is easy for him, but somehow he knows that if push comes to shove, he will get up and he will do what needs to be done, even if it is for once in their lifetime. Reluctant heroes. The point of today's podcast or show is that all of us must have a trait of the reluctant hero in us. People who don't necessarily go looking for trouble like active heroes. People who are not necessarily as passive as the mother whose child is in danger. They know to do good and they are committed. They've made a commitment to themselves that if it is required, they will step up to the plate and they will be good people. Take a look around the world. Those are the kinds of people that we need. And more of us can be reluctant heroes than we can be active heroes. Very few of us will be thrust in the place of passive heroism. But the point is that every one of us, whether active, whether passive, whether reluctant, we all can be heroes. I'm going to go on a break now. When I come back, I'll be highlighting some of the qualities of reluctant heroes, things you will find in ordinary men every day, and yet nobody esteems them as they have done heroic things. Please don't go away. When I come back, I'll be able to take that. God bless you.
In a world filled with many fears and discouragement, life often becomes a burden. For those who know the way, life is just simple. Do not worry, you're not alone on this life's journey, as Bidemi Mark-Mordi shares powerful insights and principles from her everyday work and life experiences in her book, NeverTheLess. NeverTheLess is a book designed to encourage and equip you to face life with courage, hope, and determination. Get a copy of NeverTheLess and other books written by Bidemi Mark-Mordi, like The Wisdom of the Seed, Honor, The Theology of Work, and so much more from a bookstore nearby, or call 080-905-63555, or send an email to bidemi@bidemimarkmordi.com to place your order. I guarantee you will make it. Nevertheless.
Welcome back. It's still the NeverTheLess show, a show for organic leaders and leaderpreneurs. We're looking at the subject matter of heroism, and this episode we're looking at the kinds or types of heroes. Before we went on the break, I shared that there are three archetypal heroes, or three archetypes of heroes that I wanted to highlight. The active hero, the one that thinks that the world cannot go on without him, the one whose life work is to step up to the plate. That's the labor activists and all of those people who feel like they are the ones that have been entrusted with the capacity to save the world. And then we have the passive hero, the one who it is only because they are forced or coerced into a situation, they will never carry out heroic acts. We gave example of a woman whose child was trapped under a car. And because of that, she mustered the strength from God knows where to lift the car so that their child could be pulled out. And then we have the reluctant hero. Who are my heroes today? and through this series, people who do life generally, just the ordinary people, but who are willing to step up to the plate and do extraordinary things. Before we went on the break, I did say to us that I would like to take a look at some of the qualities that make a reluctant hero a reluctant hero. But before we get there, what's the difference between a passive hero and a reluctant hero? The difference is that the passive hero, something has to threaten something for them to get up. They are non-committed. They really don't want to live that life unless they have no choice. But the reluctant hero doesn't go around looking for trouble like the active hero. But he knows that if a day ever comes and he's required, he will step up to the plate. The difference, therefore, between the passive hero and the reluctant hero is that the reluctant hero keeps preparing for the day that fate would require them. They keep preparing and they keep going out every day with the mindset that if I'm needed today, I will not be found wanting. If I'm needed today, I will not be found wanting. But really, this segment of this episode, we want to focus on what makes a reluctant hero a reluctant hero. But before I get into those qualities, let's talk about David. If you go to the Bible, I believe it's in 1 Samuel 17, we'll see David, the teenager, show up to deliver food to his brothers, Eliab and the others, at the valley of Elah, where there was a war between them, or they were preparing to go to war between Israel and the Philistines. And while David was there delivering food, don't forget, he saw that Goliath would show up every day. And at the point when David got there, Goliath had showed up every day for 40 days to taunt the Israelites. He said to the Israelites, he called them the servants of Saul. And he challenged them to a one-on-one combat. He said they should give him a man to dwell with him. And if they did that, whoever won in that one-on-one combat would mean that their nation had won. And the Bible said the spirit of the soldiers of Israel failed in them until David showed up. But when you take a look at David, David was just a young boy who was running an errand for his father. He wasn't a warrior per se. Even though he had been trained in archery, I don't think he was ripe or old enough to be sent to the battlefield. David shows up and he stands there and he listens to how Goliath was running down the people that God had, the people of God. And David realized something. And he said, who is this uncircumcised Philistine that dares to do what? Defy the armies of the living God. David understood something that I would talk about later, the point of identity. He understood that identity determines whether someone would rise up to the plate on the day where his heroic acts are the only thing that will save the day. David went to the core of the matter and he said, who is this uncircumcised Philistine who dares to defy the armies of the living God? In that one conversation, David redefined the outlook of who he was and who Goliath was. And as you know, the rest is history. But what were the qualities that were spoken to Saul about David later? The first one was that he was ordinary. He was ordinary because even when they started to talk to Paul about the one who would come and play the mystery so that the evil spirit can leave Saul, all they said was that he was skilled at his job. Reluctant heroes, like I said earlier on, they prepare. They are ordinary people who prepare and get themselves ready for the day while they will be called for. If in today's conversation, if I had to use a term that you probably understand, reluctant heroes are what I would call reserve forces. They train, but they know that they may never be called out to battle, and they're fine with it. And honestly, if they had to volunteer, they won't be the first set of people to say, I want to go to battle. But they are trained and they are ready. And if they find themselves in battle, they will do just as excellently as the active hero. Reluctant heroes are relatable. Men see themselves in them. They can talk to them. When you walk up on the street and you see an ordinary man doing extraordinary things, you don't feel threatened by them. They are not superheroes. They have no cape. There's nothing special about them. They are relatable and they are likable. Sometimes because they also have faults. Reluctant heroes do not seek attention. They don't live by the camera. Neither do they swear by social media. They do their things and they step away because they recognize that this is what it will be. Now, in the account of David and Goliath, if you remember, after David killed Goliath, it was not David that went on the street and started to scream, Saul killed his thousands and David his 10,000s. It was the people who admired. Funny enough, it was the women, the Bible said. They were not even there when David killed Goliath, but the gist had gotten to them. They were the ones that put David on a pedestal and called him a hero. What David did, because he was a reluctant hero, was to show up where he needed to show up in that day. They do not seek attention. If you saw the subsequent conversations or interactions that David had, even with Saul, you will recognize that he was not attention seeking. He wasn't trying to be a hero at all costs, to the extent that even when Saul started to chase him for his life, David was that man who had the opportunity to take out Saul, but he didn't find it necessary. Reluctant heroes do not seek attention, neither do they pay for adventure just to be. They are not adventure, they're not adrenaline junkies. Life just thrusts them in the face of something and they get it done. The thing about reluctant heroes is they also have doubts, sometimes, of their abilities to be heroic. David, in the conversation with Jonathan, went on and on about, what did I do to your father? I was just trying to help. And then he said to Jonathan, I know your father will try to come for my life again. Will you help me? You can see his reluctance in stepping to that place. He wasn't looking for the shiny objects. He just wanted to do what it is that he could do. For those people who are reluctant heroes, heroism is mostly an accident. It is, even though they prepare, they don't show up because you will never find a reluctant hero get up and go knocking on doors asking whether there's trouble that he can take care of. But if he finds someone beating on their wives, he will step up. Not because it is his favorite thing to do, but because it is the required thing to do. So for reluctant heroes, heroism is an accident. It's not the norm. Most of the time. Reluctant heroes are not self-serving. 80% of the time, the things that they do for others. It's not about them. As a matter of fact, most reluctant heroes don't pay attention to themselves. They have to be forced to give attention to themselves because they only show up to do what they need to do because other people are requiring it. And the last thing I want to share about reluctant heroes is that they are comfortable the way they are. So if they only have to step up to the plate once a year, they are fine with it. If they have to do it 4 times a year, they are fine with it. A reluctant hero does not lose sleep because he posted something on social media and someone did not like it and say, yeah, there are still good people in the earth. They do not do what they do for attention. Now, why is this important? This is important because that's how God configured us. Even though God is put of himself in us, and therefore we have the capacity to be heroes, he doesn't want us to become a nuisance in the place of heroes. He wants us to show up when we are required. He wants us to do what is required of us, and he wants us to feel okay or be okay to step back without having to shout. He doesn't want us to be hung up on the things that we do. He wants us to always be in a place of relationship with him. The world is too tough for everybody to be jostling the way we are jostling right now, just because we want to be seen as people who are heroes. You see, the thing I like most about reluctant heroism is no one needs to know and no one needs to say thank you. Because the reluctant hero understands something that every one of us needs to understand. First and foremost, what we do is to God. Whether you saved a nation or you saved a bird, first and foremost, the only reason why you were moved with that compassion or whatever it is you were moved with to step up to the plate is because God put the capacity on the inside of you. What have I been saying? I'm saying that heroic acts will be required daily. And I'm saying that as long as we don't tag a special kind of people as heroes, that every one of us may be able to step up to the plate and make our contribution. Think about Navy SEALs, for instance. They're the most specialized, I think, of the US Naval Force. But you don't find them on the street with capes and with all kinds of banners claiming that they are SEALs. As a matter of fact, stealth is their training. To be invisible, V-I-S-I, not V-I-C-I. To be invisible, to show up and be as ordinary as it's possible. The point I'm making is that reluctant heroism is that class of heroism where our strength surprises the enemy. Our strength surprises the situation. Our strength confounds comprehension. God is looking for men and women who will step into that place where they don't want to be known, where they are not loud, when they are not screaming, "See me, I'm here," where all of those things don't matter to them, but they will rather just live their lives in such a way that every single day they are effective. Here's what I know. Think about a Superman, for instance. Assuming a Superman was never found out, don't you think he would have been more effective? But the moment they realized that he had these extraordinary powers, people, the enemies, made it their life work to determine what could bring him down. They found out it was kryptonite, yes? And then they made it their life work to ensure that he didn't have that strength and he couldn't perform at the level that he performs. If we were a bit more discreet with our acts of heroism, wouldn't we be a lot more effective? That's the question that I want to leave you with this week. This is the Nevertheless show. My name is Bidemi Mark-Mordi. And next week when we come back, we will continue this conversation about heroism and reluctant heroes. Thank you for joining me. Please remember to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Remember to follow me on social media. And please remember to especially share this. If you have a comment, please leave it under this episode. And who knows, I may just call you in to come and have a conversation with me. Thank you so much. I'll see you next week, if Jesus tarries. Remember, if you embrace your superpower, you would live powerful lives. God bless you, and bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Nevertheless. For more information and resources, call 080-90563-555 or send an email to bidemi@bidemimarkmordi.com. Don't forget, discovering your purpose helps you live more powerfully.